Hi guys, thank you for coming. Let me kick off. Hope everyone's had a chance to grab some food, grab a seat. We've got plenty more seats over there, but feel free to stand wherever is comfortable. Again, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, awesome, great. Thank you for joining us. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Lane Reddig. I'm the founder of Crypto NYC. I'm super excited about everything we have in store for you guys tonight. I know how busy everyone is this time of year. I know we're coming up against the holidays, and so I just want to say thank you for joining us. I promise that 2 hours from now when you leave, you will not look at the world and you will not think about blockchain the same way. Come see me if you do, because there's a problem. So unless you've been hiding under a rock, you have probably been hearing about Bitcoin and Litecoin and Ethereum and all the whole host of other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin fever is a real thing. CryptoKitties are a real thing. Believe me when I say this is just the beginning. 2018 is going to be crazy. However, we are here tonight to talk about a different angle. I want you guys to remember that the most interesting and the most important thing about Bitcoin is not its price. And you guys will hear plenty about that very soon. Got to keep reminding ourselves of that as we achieve new heights. I think it's clear to everyone here that we being pretty much all people, humanity, are on the verge of some pretty big changes. Bitcoin exists now, Ethereum exists. These are new technologies, and they're not going to be uninvented. They're not going away. They've begun to change the world, and the change is coming fast. And I think we don't entirely know yet exactly what that change means. That's what we're here to think about and talk about tonight. I'm really excited, and I'm sure many other people here are as well. I'm as excited as I am about anything I've ever been excited about. I really mean that from my heart. The opportunities before us, the ability to bank the unbanked, to move money around the world seamlessly and nearly for free, without permission, the opportunity to protect people from hyperinflation. Those of us from places like Argentina or Zimbabwe or Venezuela will appreciate that. Enacting censorship-resistant commerce. Those are huge, lofty goals, and they're important. But I want to be honest with you guys as well. I want to speak from the heart and tell you where the theme for tonight's event came from. It's not all rainbows and unicorns. I think that I personally have a feeling, and I've had trouble kind of putting words on that feeling lately. Obviously, there's the excitement, but the other feeling that I've begun to feel is, I think the best thing I can call is trepidation. It's a little bit of fear. I think that even for optimists like myself, or people who are hoping for change, that change is coming much faster than I predicted or expected. I think we need change. I think we can all agree that there are things that need to be changed and improved. And these technologies have enormous potential for us, but I think we stand at a bit of an inflection point, a bit of a precipice right now. And I think that there's a couple paths before us, and it's not completely clear to me kind of which direction this is going to go. I think we have potential before us to do enormous good in the world along the lines I was describing, but there's potential for a lot of harm to be done as well. Anyway, I'm optimistic, and meeting some of our amazing speakers, folks like Ben and Santi, make me hopeful. And I hope you guys will join me in the optimism. I think that the theme tonight is going to be optimism, but I just wanted to again speak from the heart and let you guys know that it's we have choices before us, and so this is the theme tonight. I think these technologies allow us to do nothing less than completely reshape capitalism and change the entire world order. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. That's scary to me. Okay, so with that out of the way, a couple of quick housekeeping items. Let me tell you guys a little bit about who we are, what Crypto NYC is. I'm sure this name is probably new to many of you. So again, this is our first large event. So thank you guys so much for coming and joining us tonight. A few months ago, I was exactly where probably many of you guys are today. In fact, I think I can say all of my teammates at Crypto NYC were feeling excited, but a little bit confused, a little bit overwhelmed by some of the noise, things we were hearing. And we basically built Crypto NYC to address that. We have a 2- or 3-fold mission. We seek to bring people together, connect amazing folks such as yourselves, to help people cut through the noise, understand what matters, what are kind of the more reliable sources of information, the best events to go to, the best people to meet, that kind of thing. We have a co-working space In Brooklyn, we have a very active Telegram group. We have a weekly newsletter. We do weekly lunches that are open for anybody to join, and we'll be doing many more events like this and like the lunches in the future. So check out crypto.nyc.org. Should be up here for more information about the organization. Let me also quickly take the opportunity to thank Galvanize for being our sponsor tonight. Galvanize is, hopefully you figured out by now, that's where we are. I've had a chance to kind of hang out here a lot the past few months and get to know the folks who run this place. And I'm, again, speaking from the heart when I say that they've done a lot for us as a community, helping enable blockchain events and communities such as Crypto NYC to grow. They are also very kindly and generously the host of some of the other blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum related meetups. So great place to check out, hang out. If you guys are looking for co-working, come talk to the Galvanize folks. All right, last housekeeping item. Please tweet about the event using the hashtag #blockchain4good. And you can look for Crypto NYC and Democracy Earth on Twitter. We will be doing a panel at the end after our speakers, and we'll be actually accepting questions on Twitter using the hashtag. So again, hashtag #blockchain4good. We'll probably do questions by mic as well, but it actually is easier on Twitter. Finally, let me introduce our first speaker. Thanks for letting me drone on for a while. This beautiful guy here, Ben Siegel, is the co-founder. I hear he's a good dancer too. I'm not a good dancer. Ben spoke at the UN this morning, so he's a little tired. But thanks for being here. So Ben is the co-founder and impact policy manager of the social impact team at Consensus. His team is doing tremendous work, which Ben will tell you about, building technologies and a coalition to bring the power of the blockchain to people in need around the world. Please join me in welcoming Ben Siegel.
Thank you guys for having me. This is quite a large crowd. It's pretty fun to be up here. And honestly, it's honestly a lot less nerve-wracking to be here than it is to be at the UN because you guys are probably a lot more fun. We have to hold this really close.
Turn the volume up if you want.
Over here. Sorry. Is that better? Yes, that's definitely better. No, it's not. Anyways, I'm going to start with a question, and I know a significant portion of you in here know the answer. And if you know that I know that you know the answer, please don't raise your hands. Who knows what a blockchain is? So the question was, who knows what a blockchain is? And if you do, please raise your hand high. Who has never heard of blockchain? Amazing. Does anybody want to take a stab at telling everyone else what a blockchain is? Do you want to kind of go through a life or death scenario where I get to be the emperor and give you a thumbs up or thumbs down on your explanation? Any interest? Amazing. Go for it.
So it's basically a ledger. Like you go to the city hall and they have this big book and they write down all the transactions of when people bought and sold houses. And so it's like a ledger, except it's immutable and it's distributed all over the world to thousands and thousands of different machines, like they're called nodes. And basically every transaction that happens is recorded in there, encrypted, and saved forever. So you can see everything that has happened in the blockchain. So that's a simple version.
Yeah, that's a great start. And I think for everyone in the room who doesn't know what a blockchain is or has never really heard of a blockchain, what we have is a technology that is a ledger. Ledgers have been around for all of human history, ever since the ancient Sumerians decided to start writing some lines on mortar, bricks, whatever they wrote. Ledgers are common. Everything's a ledger. You have a ledger on your phone. You have all sorts of ledgers on your phone. What a blockchain does is that it takes the information on that ledger, and as opposed to storing it in a central location, whether that's your phone or a data server or anywhere, it spreads it across a decentralized network that's made up of all of the computers that are currently operating that node. What that means is that your information is transparent. Anybody on the ledger, if it's a public blockchain, anybody on that ledger running that node can look at the transactions that are happening. There are some problems with that. We're working around them. Also, it means that it's much more secure than a single source, than a single point of data. If you think about where your information is stored at a data center, on a data server, it's stored in one location. somebody could go in there and hit it with a hammer and everything you own or believe in is gone. That's not good at all. So we have with the blockchain is if it's decentralized, it's spread across, on the Ethereum blockchain, it's about 22,000 nodes spread across the entire globe. So if you wanted to wipe the Ethereum blockchain off the face of the earth, you would have to go hit 22,000 computers with a hammer. Good luck. Questions, comments, concerns? Can I get rid of the mic and just yell?
No. Super close, like it sounds comfortable.
All right, so now that we've kind of gone over what a blockchain is, we're gonna keep this pretty quick, kind of just talk about what that means for the world. What we have with the blockchain is a tool that innately allows for peer-to-peer interactions. I can go out, I can interact with Kyle in the back on a peer-to-peer level. I can send him money, I can transact, I can share information with him without having to go through an intermediary. If we think about the world right now, there are intermediaries just about everywhere. Bankers, lawyers, accountants, if you're in the room, please don't get offended. We have developed over the last couple hundred years a class of people who are very vital to the flow of money throughout the economy. Bankers, lawyers, and accountants, they have very specialized skills that are really kind of completely necessary for the economy to function. That also makes them able to concentrate wealth at certain friction points in the economy to a very nasty extent. We all saw, well, yeah, I'm probably the youngest person here. We all saw the financial collapse in 2007, 2008. We know what happens when money is pulled at the top. We know what happens when banks are too big to fail. There's a reason why Satoshi wrote his white paper about blockchain in 2007, 2008. It's a direct response to that wealth gap. It's a direct response to the economic system that we built. And it's a direct response to all of the problems that we have as a result of money being stored in certain places at the top of the pyramid and not being shared. Clear? Cool. Awesome. So what we have with a blockchain is truly a tool that's about democratizing the system. It's about distributing wealth across the entire pyramid. By creating these peer-to-peer connections and disintermediating the system, so taking away those bankers, those lawyers, and accountants, you allow for the flow of funds to move at a much faster rate from point A to point B and not just get stopped at the lower top. That's incredibly impactful. There are about 2.6 billion people on planet Earth who don't have access to the economy. 2.6 billion unbanked people. That's many trillions of dollars in untapped economic potential. You see people suffering in poverty because they don't have an identity. You see people suffering in poverty because they have no access to financial tools. For some reason or another, they are kept out of the system. They're kept out of a system that's been built up over the last 700 years, specifically, whether or not on purpose, but a system that's designed to make the top rich. That's not what happens when you have peer-to-peer connections. When you are able to create markets, like with a blockchain, that kind of just spread across the globe, you connect individuals to each other, the money flows. Those unbanked people get access to the economy. It's really powerful. It's really cool. So that's just kind of a brief intro. What I do at Consensus, so I work at a company called Consensus. If anybody here doesn't know what Consensus is, please raise your hands. All right, guys, we're not there yet. We got a lot of work. Consensus is we are a venture production studio. We are an enterprise solution consulting organization, building solutions and building out products and helping Ethereum. Sorry, building Ethereum solutions. So we build things called decentralized applications on top of the Ethereum blockchain. The Ethereum blockchain is the second most popular blockchain on planet Earth after Bitcoin. I won't get too much into Bitcoin or Ethereum because Santi won't like that, but we'll let him take it away with Bitcoin. So what we do at Consensus is we take the kind of mutability of the blockchain, we take the transparency, and there are things called smart contracts, which are programmed into Ethereum. You're able to build business logic, and you're able to build platforms and applications that function just like they would on any other software platform, but they're secured and made transparent by the nature of the blockchain. So we're building a system, we're building a world that allows us to really create something that we like to call Web 3.0, which is an internet where you guys all control your own data. You're all slaves to Facebook, Amazon, and Google right now. They make money off your back, they make money off advertising, they make money off everything you do on the internet. Facebook makes $16 approximately per year off every Facebook account there is. That's $32 billion a year just because people have Facebook. That's an incredible amount of wealth pooling at the top for no reason other than the fact that they own that. You guys don't. It's not good. So what I do is I take this kind of concept, I take these applications, I take this knowledge that we have, and apply it directly to the social impact sector. So how do we take a blockchain and work with a humanitarian organization? How do we take a blockchain and work with a government or an NGO, a foundation, a philanthropic investor, any sort of person looking at directly using this technology on the ground for the aid of people who are currently kind of left out of the system? Really quickly, the main project we're focusing on right now, we're mostly doing research and design into what does blockchain look like for international development, with a focus on working towards cleaning up oil spills in Nigeria, just by paying the workers the money they deserve to get paid. Right? People deserve to get paid for work. We all of a sudden have a tool that allows us to cut out the intermediaries. That's not that happening. It's a good place to be. But it's also really important as we talk about this technology that we acknowledge that it's specifically Ethereum, 2.5 years old. Bitcoin's 10 years old. We're talking about children. A kid in diapers that's just learning how to talk. It doesn't know, we don't know what it can do yet, but we're learning. And that's the most powerful thing we can do right now. So when we bring together people in a room like this, and we have an event focused on the social impact side of things, and it's really about learning. And it's as much about learning for you guys as it is for me. Because as the community grows, that's the most powerful resource we have. The more people we can bring into the space, the more good ideas we can bring into the space, the more people with that same ethos that this is a tool for social impact, the better the technology is going to be. And this has to be the driving conversation. I do kind of think that at a time where we might be seeing blockchain start to be a little bit co-opted by the current powers that be. And that's not what we want. I don't think that's what anybody wants. You have this ethos around blockchain that this was a tool that was made to benefit the masses. This is Robinhood. This is technological Robinhood. We're going to steal from the poor and give to the rich. But we got to be careful. We got to drive the conversation. Oh yeah, we're going to steal from the rich and give to the poor. Well, I will be leaving my job and going to college. So when we come to events like this, and you guys have the opportunity to listen to someone like Santi speak about, what they're doing with democracy here, that's the dialogue that we want people to take away. That's the conversation that we want people in this space to have. It should be talked about as a social impact tool. It should be talked about as a democratizer. As Lane said, we have to stop talking about the price. I actually got asked this morning what I thought would happen if the price of Bitcoin plummeted. And I was like, man, I hope Bitcoin plummets because then we'll just get back to building things. And that's what we gotta do. Technology is growing, it's expanding. Every day we're learning new things. We're getting research into ideas. We're seeing new ideas develop. We're seeing new use cases be deployed. We're seeing new use cases be just ideas generated. The World Food Program is feeding refugees with a blockchain-enabled system. That's awesome. That's really cool. They're saving $200,000 a month on aid delivery and redeploying that to another place. That's the power of what we have. We have a tool that allows us to just save money and make sure it's used properly and it's distributed equally. I'm not super sure there's ever been anything like that on planet Earth before. Money tends to be the be-all end-all. And if we can distribute it, and we have a tool that can distribute it, we're just going to make the world a better place by nature. So let's drive the conversation with that and not let Bitcoin futures be the only thing to talk about. Awesome. I'll hand it over to Santi now, guys.
You're going to use my laptop or your laptop?
I'm going to use mine. You have the adapter for that? I have it.
You have USB as well? Yeah. Both?
Yeah.
Okay. All yours.
Okay, we'll do a little technical switch here.
I'm going to introduce Santi, and I'm just going to speak very slowly.
Okay.
Very slowly. Here, take this.
That's the way to do it. Let me look for the adapter.
Okay. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Santiago Siri. a friend of mine, Santi clearly needs no introduction. I'm going to do it anyway. He's an entrepreneur, a tech evangelist, and a politician from Argentina. I first met Santi a few months ago, and he's actually a big part of the reason that I decided to dedicate myself full-time to blockchain. He's that kind of a guy. I jokingly refer to him as the prophet, and when you hear him speak, if you haven't already, you will understand why shortly. I've never met another person who is as able to speak eloquently about the power and the importance of these new technologies. While most people are trying to find ways to use blockchain to make a buck, like we've been hearing about it again and again, Santi and his team have been dedicated for years to using technology to make the world a better place. I don't have that much more, so you guys gotta get started.
Well, we might have to use your laptop because the adapter is not HDMI. Okay, so we'll go back to this. You have one HDMI? Oh, the wisdom of the crowd. Keep going. Keep flattering me.
I'll keep going as long as I can. A hacktivist to his core, Santi started a political party, was himself a congressional candidate in Buenos Aires, wrote a book called Hacktivismo, and founded Democracy Earth Foundation, a product of Silicon Valley's Y Combinator and Google-backed Fast Forward accelerators. MIT Technology Review of Latin America just named him its 35 under 35 Visionary of the Year. And tonight he's here to talk about the intersection between geopolitics, blockchain, and democracy. The Democracy Earth Foundation is literally reinventing democracy for the 21st century, for a post-blockchain world. That's not like marketing copy, that's legitimately what these guys are doing. They're really taking a step back and asking the question, what is democracy, what has democracy been, and what can it be today and in the future, given our new tools? Society is changing. They recently released their white paper, which is awesome. I highly recommend reading it on their website. And they also just released a beta version of their software called Sovereign. Quote, open source software for incorruptible, blockchain-based decision-making for institutions of all sizes, enabling true democratic governance for the internet age. Their project, including the white paper, is all totally open source. It's all on their website. It's all on GitHub, including the paper, so you should check it out and contribute to it. You good?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Santiago Siri of Democracy Earth.
Thank you, Lane. Thank you, Crypto NYC, for pushing me to this night. I was really looking forward to this. And let's hope we make a revolution tonight. That won't depend on me. It will depend on what we do with the ideas that we take from here and how we push them forward to society. So we're probably all here to talk in the middle of a context that has to do with the significant rise of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. But I would like to make an introduction today to the topic from a different angle, from a geopolitical angle. And when we look at this chart, people immediately think about Bitcoin. But the reality is that that's a chart about the US dollar. And I'm going to start today talking about the US dollar and the divorce between money and state that we're witnessing across the whole globe as more people adopt these technologies. So the story around fiat currencies that we get told that in 1971, Richard Nixon emancipated the US dollar from the gold standard, it's only half true. That's part of the story, but not the whole picture of what was going on in the 70s. It's true that the dollar quitted the gold standard, but at the same time, this was going on. Nixon was meeting with the Saudis. This picture is from 1974, and basically told the Saudis, either you make every single oil deal in US dollars, or check out Vietnam. And the Saudis agree. And the consequence of that is that the dollar went from the gold standard to the petrodollar, which is, in other words, an energy-backed currency. And the business of the US dollar was monopolizing the accounting of energy based on fossil fuels. That is the whole story of what was going on with the US dollar. And this is a very interesting thing to notice. Look how happy Vicky and Henry were there. Okay, first joke of the night. This is something really very interesting to follow, because when you start looking into the dollar this way, then you start realizing, boy, these have a very high maintenance cost. Basically, when any country decided, I'm not going to make oil deals in US dollars, I'm going to use my own stuff, or Saddam Hussein in 1990, basically, boom, they get airstrikes and they get killed in 1 week. When Gaddafi tried to do the same thing and started making oil contracts using euros, the consequences were instant and lethal. So there is a very high cost to maintain the status quo of the dollar. And we need to weigh that when we talk about also the cost of maintaining these new emergent networks and technologies we call blockchains. So then this happened, which is, if we're talking about bubbles, let's talk about all the bubbles. After the subprime crisis and the massive fraud of banks selling mortgages of mortgages of mortgages, the Federal Reserve printed in a very short span of time almost $1.8 trillion. So if you want to compare the size of crypto market size, of market capitalization of crypto, this is a good reference to check if markets are actually smart about numbers. So, you see throughout the history of the dollar, when it went post-gold standard, that it had this quantitative easing technique, then snafu, and they printed out of the blue almost $2 trillion. So people started noticing this. People actually started noticing that there's suddenly an influx of dollars out there that does not make any sense. And for instance, China and Russia started making oil deals and energy deals in a different way. China started buying gas from the Russians, and they told the Russians to make every single oil deal in renminbi, the Chinese currency, and the Russians were willing to accept because the Chinese are backing the renminbi with gold. And Russia, for some reason, is the largest hoarder of gold in the world. So they are now colluding or trying to beat the historical monopoly of the US dollar in the energy markets. And that's a very big change. And in this case, these are nuclear powers. Both these guys, they have nukes. So you cannot mess with them in a direct form. You can mess with them in proxy states like Syria and North Korea. But directly, no way. So things are starting to change. And the dominant position of the dollar is no longer the case. Satoshi noticed it. Satoshi, on the very first Genesis block of the Bitcoin blockchain, encoded in the information in that block a headline, I think it was from a British newspaper, specifically mentioning the huge bailouts that were being made to rescue the banks. Like, if Satoshi is a politician, he's a very smart one, because the very first block in the blockchain has a political statement in it. And I really believe that any relevant blockchain-based technology, by definition and by the nature of these networks, will be geopolitical. This is a technology that is coming to change no longer the cultural layer of how we engage as a society, but the institutional layer. And we get the chance to work with a new canvas, to rethink the rules of the world, to rethink what we understand about the inner gears of institutions. We have this chance as a generation. And I think this is the most exciting thing coming up with blockchains. Oh, this slide shouldn't be here, but check this out. It was in the MIT servers in 1996. Pretty much describes everything that happened with Bitcoin. This is a chart that I like when looking at the price of Bitcoin. This is a chart that really, puts Bitcoin in the y-axis instead of the US dollar. And this is saying a lot about this big change. There was a tweet last week, someone tweeted it, it was very good. Bitcoin is not the bubble, it's the pin. And as we, this is I understand that this is a very traumatic piece of news. I come from Argentina, and in Argentina, we've been through stuff like this our whole life. We saw hyperinflation, and suddenly our money was not worth the same during the morning than it was during the afternoon or the evening. So you had to rush to the supermarket to buy things fast because they were going to be more difficult to buy them with the same amount of currency within the 24 hours. Then we pegged our currency to the US dollar. We had that dollar standard in our economy in the 90s. And when we were able to meet our debt, our international debt, then the government confiscated the funds, and the ratio of 1 peso, $1 was no longer there, so people lost their savings. So we've been in Argentina through a lot of traumatic financial events of very large scale. And the sensation, looking at many of the dynamics ongoing with the disruption of these technologies, when you contrast them with traditional currencies, look in many ways very similar, including the weirdo president. True, and it's like we've had a lot of those. So the maintenance cost, as we have been discussing in the media and social media, and many headlines have been about this, is energy. There have been many titles of articles and headlines talking about how expensive it is to maintain the Bitcoin network, and how it takes almost the amount of energy of the island of Ireland, or how a Bitcoin transaction, once it gets verified, is the cost of a household during 1 week. It's true, there's a big, very cost regarding the maintenance of these networks. But the fascinating thing is that Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the other blockchains as well, gives us almost perfect resolution in regarding the amount of energy that they are using. If I want to look exactly at the amount of energy that it costs to maintain the security of the US dollar or any fiat currency, it's impossible to calculate because they print it, you don't know where it goes, there's no blockchain where you can trace the transactions, and you really don't know. The cost of maintaining an army might be part of the cost of maintaining the status quo of those currencies. But the security of blockchain-based network is not based on force, it's based on cryptography. And cryptography is an intrinsically defensive form of security. So the fact that with these networks we're actually understanding on a global scale how much energy we're using, we can start to look what are those energy sources, says a lot about the kind of potential these technologies have to fight the big global challenges that we're going to face on this century, mainly climate change, and everything is pretty much related to energy. So accounting energy is the name of the game. Accounting, whatever currency wants to be the world's reserve, has to be the best currency at accounting energy and giving us a very clear understanding how we are using that energy as a humanity. So an interesting story is what's going on in China with the miners. Actually, in China, energy companies, because they are in still underpopulated cities, which are very big, but they still don't have enough demand for energy, the energy companies usually produce an excess, a surplus, which they don't end up meeting the market demands, so it's wasted. And what the energy companies are doing with that otherwise wasteful energy is mining Bitcoin. And the increasing price in Bitcoin in the markets is helping some of these energy companies actually use Bitcoin as a way to subsidize energy costs for their population. So it's a variable that they are playing with, and a battery that helps them not to waste any energy that would otherwise be wasted, and start bringing, connecting energy companies into a global economy, bypassing even the Chinese government. So we could argue that maybe Bitcoin is kind of a Trojan horse in Chinese territory. So, but there are still wars, and these are nerd wars, which are super fun to watch. If you look into the army side, it's like the strangest people you can imagine. And they're all on Twitter and on Reddit. But we've seen the rest of these conflicts and these attempts to control the protocols happen this year. There was a successful fork and there was an unsuccessful fork. The successful fork was Bitcoin Cash. You probably saw about this in August. Craig Wright and Yihan Wu and some of the folks related to the miners in China that are Roger Ver, they argue on the idea that they need to increase on-chain scaling, so that benefits the miners, that benefits whoever is able to control the hardware. Is the CIA entering the room and swatting us? They're going to swat us, and they're coming for me. I get more and more paranoid the more I spend time in this industry. I'm not kidding. I don't know why you're laughing. Why are you laughing? Okay, so Bitcoin Cash is the fork that benefits China. We could, speculate on whether there is actually a state actor behind that fork. Then there was the corporate takeover of Bitcoin, which was SegWit2x, this idea of doing the best of both worlds and making a fork that increases the blocks on 2 megabytes, and it brings segregated witness, which is a security improvement on how signatures are managed in the blockchain. But SegWit2x got called off. Finally, the pressure from the community, from the crypto trolls on social media, and everyone involved with this economy convinced the largest corporations that were pushing for this change to back off. The corporations needed it because they are the ones dealing with the support tickets, the customer support tickets, and they are dealing, with bottlenecks on the Bitcoin transactions, and of course they need scalability. But if reaching scalability of a censorship-resistant technology is achieved by a few people making an agreement in New York, that goes totally counter the spirit of the kind of freedom that these networks need to protect. So it was very good news in my view. I try to be neutral on Twitter because you have to be open-minded, but I kind of celebrated that the fork got called off. But the interesting thing was what happened 5 days after that, on that weekend. And things happen during weekends because that's when the regulators are sleeping. So during weekends, people do very weird trades. And the weekend next after the fork got called off, we saw this massive pump of Bitcoin Cash. The Chinese are doing something. What wasn't that commented was that at the same time, there was a response from Bitcoin Gold, which is a very weird fork that changes the mining process from using ASICs, which is what the miners use, to using GPUs, graphical processing units. ASICs, 70% of the ASIC hardware is controlled by Bitmain, a Chinese company. 70% of the GPUs are controlled by NVIDIA, an American corporation. So when the Bitcoin Cash pump happened, suddenly the Bitcoin Gold pump also happened. And it looks to me like it's two pointing guns. Bitcoin Gold is pointing a gun to Bitcoin Cash, saying we can mine with GPUs. And Bitcoin Cash is trying to get control of Bitcoin by bring the whole narrative on increasing the bandwidth of transactions. So we are seeing these attempts to control the forks no longer through FUD and bad headlines and bad publicity. Already, JP Morgan made us a lot of favors this year, talking, Jamie Dimon talking bad about Bitcoin. Thank you, Jamie. Keep doing your role. You're the perfect Lex Luthor for this industry. But those things no longer have an impact. When Jamie Dimon and the Chinese banks in the same week started giving very bad publicity to Bitcoin, the price went down, but the next week was already at the same level. Now it's like 5 times above that. So the attempts to control seem to be with competing technologies that have different dynamics. So it's really important to pay attention. And what I honestly believe is that the most important attribute that we need to protect as a community is to guarantee that these technologies stay censorship resistant, stay beyond the control of any single actor, whether good or bad. And that's the real fight. So what we're learning now is that the challenge of blockchains is not about energy. I think that there's an extraordinary opportunity about looking into the very nature of energy. I have a friend of mine, Andrew DeSantis, who even argues that the increase in mass and energy that we're perceiving in the Bitcoin blockchain can be described as gravity. We are like in the brink of understanding new properties of gravity if we start looking into the quantum properties of the Bitcoin network. DeSantis is a bit crazy, but I encourage you to follow him on Twitter. But the challenge is about governance. And governance, when you scratch into the human stories behind every blockchain, Bitcoin is very public, but in every blockchain project, you will find these struggles and interests and conflicts related to the power and the money and basically the drama of humanity. So we need to figure out how to address the governance of these kind of technologies. What is governance? To me, is answering this question, because this is the most pressing thing when you look into the real variables behind all the big problems that we see in the world. The big problems that we see in the world, climate change, refugees, terrorism, ultimately I relate it by the fact that humanity skyrocketed in the last century and nothing seems to be stopping how many of us are going to be on this planet. Some folks are doing a Noah's Ark to Mars, Elon's Ark. I think that's super cool, but still we have to figure out how we take care of everyone in the planet. And governments and nation states seem to be limited in their ability to cooperate and to scale when it comes to very pressing issues to the planet. So how do we make sure that we include everyone? That's the main question that is driving us at Democracy Earth. And we know it's incredibly crazy to think about democracy in the context of 10 billion people by the end of the century, but someone has to engage in that kind of conversation. The interesting thing is that we have the technology. Facebook reaches 2 billion people. So we can project that, and when you compare Facebook to other large entities like the Chinese government, 1.2 billion people, or the Islamic religion, like 1.6 billion people, Facebook is larger than that, and it's distributed across the whole planet. So we need to understand what it means for the internet to start becoming not just entertainment and culture and ways of subverting the American election, but actually becoming a government. So what's state of the art regarding governance? What's the best that we have related to governance in civilization? We're between two worlds. The world of the land, the world of atoms, of matter, is basically the world of those who are able to monopolize force, the armies, the nation states. They are the ones who control our bodies, who control our physical presence and our ability to move freely across the planet. If you have a visa, you can come into this country. If you don't have a visa, then you are not able to freely move in the planet you were born. So this is the world that we have inherited, the world of the land. At the same time, there's the world of the cloud, the world that tries to control our ideas, our information, our data. And these are data monopolies. And this is the handful of companies that Ben mentioned, largely Google and Facebook, which are advertising companies. 97% of the revenue is advertising. And the business of advertising is telling us what to think, what to decide. The business of advertising is to control our thoughts. And they aim to profile us because in order to stay competitive in that market, they need to be the best big brother they can possibly build in order to get that extra buck in the conversion rates of the campaigns in AdWords and whatnot. So we are trapped, our bodies are trapped between the land and our minds are trapped within the cloud. This is the context that where we're standing right now. In the land, democracy is broken. Voter participation has been going down in developed nations since the 1970s. Ever since then, across Europe and across the US, voter participation is really not there. When you look into the nature of these systems, traditional ballot voting cannot guarantee vote integrity. It can guarantee a great degree of secrecy, but the integrity of our vote is not guaranteed. It's the year 2017, and the minute you put your vote in a ballot box, you really have no guarantee if your vote was counted the right way, if your vote was manipulated in any way, and if it reached the final tally. You have no guarantee. You are trusting on good faith that the system somehow works. And in many places, it's really violent. So the quality of the technology being used for voting, it's questionable. There's lack of transparency, Donald Trump, stuff like that. And in the cloud, which the two worlds we're now realizing after last year's election are very connected, very intertwined, the cloud is also broken. They centralize our data. We don't own our information. It's stored in clusters that belong to centralized companies. We don't own our identity. Technically, Mark Zuckerberg can impersonate 2 billion people if he ever wanted to, because we're using Facebook Connect to authenticate to any website. That means that Facebook is a liability in the sense that it can't represent any of its users if it ever wanted to. They are focused on farming our attention for no real purpose other than increasing their advertising dollars, and they are monetizing on our behalf. So these two things seem to be broken, and they're actually very connected. Facebook was used for the Arab Spring. Months before the Arab Spring happened, the largest telco company in Egypt included Facebook by default on every smartphone device they were selling. Next thing you know, a Facebook page of wild gunning in the protest goes like wildfire in Egypt, and everyone knows the outcome of that story. There was a lot of hope, and then things go crazy again. Voids of power get filled very, very fast. But then the Trojan horse exploded at home. Nobody saw the ability of Russians or Congress is trying to figure that out, but the idea of targeting advertising on specific regions with fake news and using the algorithms for the machine to explode in the very home that created it is actually, from a political perspective, an extremely interesting maneuver. So now Congress is debating what's going on with Facebook, what's going on with advertisers. How could you not tell that advertisers were paying with Russian rubles? And they're scratching their head around it. And I think that it's already too late to fix Facebook. So we've been involved, Democracy Earth, on hacking governance since 2012. And I'll give you guys a brief introduction of our history. In 2012, we started a political party in Argentina that had one very simple idea. Our candidates are committed to vote in Congress always according to what citizens decide online. That's it. It's a Trojan horse party. We literally built a Trojan horse. And we went through the streets of Buenos Aires with a huge Trojan horse, and people were saying, what the fuck is that? It's a Trojan horse. And people came and took selfies with the Trojan horse, and we were able to demonstrate during the campaign that we were not just nerds on Twitter, that we had presence in the streets, and we knew our Greek myths. And it was a really great tactic. If anyone's thinking about doing a political party, do the Trojan horse. Seriously, and do a political party. It's a lot of fun, let me tell you that. And our party started building open source software for democratic participation. We started exploring on the idea, what's the right kind of software to guarantee that the votes are trusted, that there's no single point of failure that can manipulate the votes. A lot of incredible stories about the experience of starting a party. I met so many people, so many good friends that came to this in love with the cause of something that is different, not from the cliches of the left and the cliches of the right that are so boring, really. This is talking about, they call us like millennial generation. I still consider myself a millennial, even though I'm 34. But we're really the internet generation. We are the first generation that grew up and got educated on the internet. And the generations that are coming next to us, they are completely different kind of human even. So, I'm talking to you, Roma. That's what's going on. It's not millennials. Millennials, the boomers call us that. But politics, it's really fucked up. Just one story about this. When I was in France for a conference, I started getting these threats on Twitter, a lunatic guy that has been bothering me since forever. And I decided to give the guy a call. This was a guy that was coming to our party meetings and always sabotaging the meetings. He came to the meetings with two friends and they started saying, you're full of shit. And they started like, no, we had to kick them out many times. And then he continued on Twitter, then I blocked him. And then he started trolling every single follower that was replying me. And it was like, it never stopped. Like the guy's job was to troll me 24/7, for real. So one day I'm in France, I'm fed up, I cannot take it anymore, and I give the guy a call. And I start talking with him. And I'm like, dude, what can I do? Do you want us to meet? Let's have a coffee, let's chat. I'm no weirdo, I'm really passionate about what we're doing. You should meet, like the people, And in the middle of the conversation, he had a technique to talk to me. His technique was talking shit to me and then praising me. And then talking shit to me and then praising me. And he was driving me crazy until at a certain point said, what do you want? Oh, just put $1 million on the name of this judge and you will get the rights to a party next year when the elections happen. And he gave me the name of the judge. And that was my reaction in that moment was like, what the hell are you talking about? I hung up the phone. It took me 3 days to realize that I had an open door towards bribing a federal judge in my country and run for elections. When the 2015 elections happened, there was a party, there were 18 parties running on the presidential election. 6 parties are really relevant. The other parties are like comedy stand-up. But among those parties, there was one that took 0.1% of the votes that had among the candidates this guy. So that was proof to me that he actually had the rights to a party, and he could give me the party if I bribe a judge, and the judge, writes the papers. So that's when you started to understand that you are fighting corruption, and you are fighting a rotten culture that is very nasty and that drives the incentives of the best players in that game to end up becoming what they were always hated. And I know this firsthand. When I was a candidate of my own party, I was also tempted with this poison that enters through your ears. People come and tell you, you're going to be the president of the country, you're the best. And you start believing it. That's when it gets, you start being possessed, like your ego starts doing this coup d'etat in your mind, and you start like, oh, maybe I was born to be the president of Argentina. How depressing is that? Well, it is really depressing. Really depressing. But Pia knows this. Pia lived through this. For a full 10 days, I was kind of in exercised in a way. I needed to be exercised, and finally, someone, Pia and my good friends of the party convinced me to think better. But in hindsight, you through these experiences, you understand how weird politics can be and how that game is really not worth pursuing. You really cannot change the system from within. The system will change you first. It's that strong because it has that power legacy of history. And we are humans, and we are vain and limited in many ways. So that's politics. So a miracle happened in 2015. Y Combinator, I'm a nerd. I've been programming since I was 9 years old. I love computers. I've been on the internet since my teenage years. And when Y Combinator noticed us, it was like, holy shit, I'm such a big fan of Paul Graham and the Silicon Valley culture, the California way of looking at the world. which is pretty cool. And they invited us to start a non-profit. And that's where we started the Democracy Earth Foundation. And we started looking into the challenge of democracy from a completely new perspective. Instead of changing the system from within, we went full on Bucky-Fuller, and we are building a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Bucky-Fuller, great architect from the 60s, a bit crazy, but had this romantic vision of the future that I think describes a lot of the good ideas that we learned to love from Silicon Valley, from San Francisco, and that is this incredible mixture of the whole Earth mentality, the end of the outside. We are all one, and we were really inspired by that. Mostly because I got the domain democracy.earth gifted by a friend, and I thought it was super cool. So a lot of the ideas that I'm gonna introduce today are described in our paper, the social smart contract. And this is a living paper. We did the 0.1 release on September. A 0.2 release is coming very, very soon, where our ideas are evolving as more people are joining in our GitHub repo and in our Slack channel. But in the social smart contract, we really try to explore in every possible way what it means to build a democracy for the information age, what it means to build a democracy that recognizes no frontiers, and how we can harness the incredible opportunity that we have with these rising new technologies that are censorship resistant and can really shape how we connect to society on a local and on a global scale. So the problem is basically it has three big parts: identity, representation, which we can consider democracy, and voting, which we can consider related to the economics of it. And we kind of explore the idea of liquidity, as in universal basic income, the access to participate as a human right, not the access to participate because you have a lot of computers in order to process the blocks. So identity, representation, and voting. That's what we are trying to figure out. And I will give you three examples of each, very, very tangible, hopefully. Identity today in the land and the cloud, we go from using passports to access one piece of land or the other, one piece of sovereign land to the other piece of sovereign land, and passwords to access our information stored in a set of servers in the cloud or the other set of servers in the cloud. So passports and passwords are centralized solutions, and there's a lot of interesting innovations happening regarding the decentralized management of identity. There are great startups. Consensus is working with the UPort protocol. Blockstack, a fantastic startup here in New York. Blockstack is really looking into the problem, has been looking into identity for 5 years now, and they're extremely savvy about the key management side of things. The interesting thing when you look into identity in the prism of democracy and governance is that for computers, identity is nothing but a pointer in memory. What we need to really make sure is that if we are authenticating and validating humans, that we don't use only computation, but we also use attention. That's the resource. We need to start using our attention, not for CryptoKitties and clicking stuff on Facebook, but a little bit of attention to validate this emergent web of trust. Who is actually who? And it's really important for democracy that we put some effort on really keeping an identity index, decentralized identity index, where the participants, we make sure they are human because AIs are coming, and that there are no duplicates or replicants or bots or one person controlling the keys of multiple identities. So we need to figure out that proof of identity protocol in a way that really uses our conscious attention. Because the boundary, the only political boundary of the 21st century is going to be the boundary between us and the machines, between the human consciousness and the artificial intelligence. And if we want to be in charge, and that's hopefully the desire of a democracy, then we need to figure out a proof of identity protocol. What do we mean by this? In our paper, I am this guy. I am the blockchain dad, according to CoinDesk. And I really love it. Being the blockchain dad is the coolest thing after being the blockchain baby, which is Roma that is over there. When Roma was born, she's now looking into video games, hopefully. When Roma was born, I did this little experiment. I'm gonna, oh yeah, Pia is gonna be, don't look at Pia. There is Pia, there is, okay. That's Roma. So this video file, the day after Roma was born, I made this video. This is an idea given to me by Ryan Shea of Blockstack. So kudos to Ryan. 1 week before Roma was born, we were drunk in a bar and he said, you should do this. And I said, okay, I will do it. It's the best idea ever. And so kudos to Ryan for giving me the idea. Great guy, the founder of Blockstack. So I shot this video. This is a digital video file. I'm showing the birth certificate of Roma. I'm using my mother and my mother-in-law as witnesses. And I use this digital file and I hash the video. I generate a hash using a service called Proof of Existence, developed by my friend Manu Arauz of Zeppelin. And with that hash, it's encoded in a Bitcoin transaction. And when that transaction is in a block in the blockchain, then I can use this video and verify it against the Bitcoin blockchain. And I will be absolutely sure that no content of this video has been corrupted, and that that video was at least shot any time before the moment that it's present on the blockchain. So effectively, this video is a certificate, and it's a video certificate that I did in a self-sovereign way. In the video, I ended declaring Roma a citizen of Earth. It's my human right as her parent to welcome her to the planet and give her a citizenship that knows no boundaries, because there are no bosses in this planet. And it's a very nice thing for her to have. She will realize when she grows up and checks her Twitter feed, all the weirdos, like, oh yeah, this is super cool, man. How do you hash it? She will understand. There's Roma there. So Roma, according to some scholars, is like the first citizen of the blockchain. So it was a very nice one. And when we talk about proof of identity, it's not the idea of doing this process with a killer app that overtakes the market. It's the idea of doing this through available tools to anyone. We need to improve the UX and simplify the process and make it easier to understand for average Joe and everyone on the planet. Then, there is a roadmap ahead. But the idea of simply being able to generate this proof with easily available tools, with a smartphone and just some proper understanding of how these technologies work. So that's our take on identity. And the idea of using video is because video is hard for an artificial intelligence to process, but not for a human. So if we want to use attention in the validating process, video uses high bandwidth, requires human brains. AIs, they still struggle with video. You need a lot of computation for an AI to work like Terminator. So I like the idea of using video, but of course, it's a growing problem as technology advances. The other aspect is representation. Okay, representation. We have top-down representation. If you think that you choose the president, you are wrong. The president is chosen by the party authorities, and among a pool of 300 million citizens, it's only like the 0.4008% of the population that gets to pick the next president. And then it gets legitimized by society. It gets legitimized with our vote. So it's a top-down approach. And in the kind of representation we have in the internet right now is basically avatars and weird people on the internet. What we're looking into is the idea of bottom-up representation. The idea of being able to allocate trust among the people we already know and trust, the people that are our family, our colleagues, or anyone that is close to our social graph. So here we explore the idea of liquid democracy, which is this hybrid model where you can vote directly on issues or delegate your voting power to someone you already know and trust. There have been some attempts at doing liquid democracy applications. The Pirate Party did something called liquid feedback many years ago. It ended up with the linguist in charge of neutralizing the proposals dominating most of the delegations, so it was effectively a monopoly. Then Google did internal research on something, there's a paper called Google Votes, and it ended up with very few people delegating, and so it was mostly a direct democracy. We do mention these experiences in our paper. We have actually researched it along with, in the case of Google, we have done research with them. But there are many interesting rules that come from economists that have been studying political currencies and political economy that can help really incentivize the system for maintaining the legitimacy and keeping it based on facts and not a political charade. So that's what we're aiming. That's what we're trying to benchmark ourselves. A system that is able to be high in legitimacy and driven by facts, not promises. And then there's voting. In traditional systems, we have ballot boxes and authorities count the votes. At the end of the day, we delegate in the authorities, in the party authorities, in the government authorities, who is the actual winner. And we have really no clarity in the understanding of what happened with our vote once we voted. Corporations run servers that process likes. But in blockchains, an interesting property emerges for democracy. And it's that it's permissionless to count the votes. Because the votes are stored in a public shared ledger, then every voter, by default, gets the right to become an auditor of the election and scrutinize the system without having to have any special access or special rights or being in debate with the party authorities. So this property really breaks one of the centralization points of any democracy as we have known them today. And it's an ability to decentralize what gives legitimacy to the democratic process, which is the guaranteeing that the vote counting is fair. So this is a very interesting emergent property when you think about democracies with these technologies. So voting is actually the main interaction we have with the internet every day. We go to the internet to vote every day. When we put likes, we are voting. When we do retweets, we are voting. When we put hearts on Instagram, we are voting. Upvotes on Reddit, we are voting. It's, these little clicks we make every day are all about democracy, but they're ultimately based on for optimizing the filtering and the editorial algorithms of these companies. They're not based for any institutional change. No matter how many likes on Facebook, if they will not impact directly the institutions. They will impact them indirectly and put Donald Trump as president. But, okay, I will stop criticizing Trump. Do I have battery? Oh yeah, I'm gonna plug. Okay, just real quick here, so I don't have to restart the thing. There we go. Boom. Okay, you're not shutting me down, Uncle Sam. Okay, the thing won't go. Okay. Not charging. Okay, so can someone plug that? That's not plugged. Okay. There we go. Thanks, guys. There we go. So we're voting every day on the internet. And this is something new. This is something we're starting to work. We have been researching about this for a year now. And it's the idea of disrupting the Facebook Live. Figuring out how to make a cryptocurrency for political economies, a cryptocurrency for voting, changing the concept of the like from something that can actually trigger institutional impact. And if we're able to generate a token that is used for democratic governance or for democratic decision-making of any kind, that is able to trigger cryptocurrency transactions or smart contracts that enforce decisions, then we have a technology for governance that is post-nation state. And we are in the process of starting to build this vote token that we want it also to be a token that is able to work with any blockchain-based network that is relevant. We are obviously thinking it as an ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain, but we might as well think about figuring out a way of integrating this with Lightning Network and with some of the main interesting innovations that are in the roadmap for these technologies. And properly figure out what's the right way where users can engage with these technologies in a simplified form that they know how to use on a daily basis, and that can help improve the protocols, whatever protocol they use for keeping their assets and for transacting and for doing generating value for the world. So we are building Sovereign, and I'm going to demo you really quick Sovereign. Sovereign has been under development for 2 years. And the idea is to build a solution that goes from the pixel in your screen to the transaction in the blockchain and to the full stack implementation that gives you a social media-like experience, where the votes can trigger institutional outcomes for any organization that wants to engage with this kind of governance. It's a token-based liquid democracy platform. That's the way we view it. But we want to make sure that it's able to run on any device, mobile and desktop. So I preloaded some screens here, knowing that demos always fail. Okay, good. There's a lot of people having birthdays today for some reason. If you're one of them, happy birthday to you. Thank you for coming here. We'll have a drink later. So we're still in alpha, which is code name for we have a lot of bugs. But it's still, it's a product that can still kind of run in production. And we did a silent release. Guess it's not that silent anymore. Within our community to start testing it out and understand how the technology can work and what's the right interface for doing a democracy with tokens and that it's liquid. So here's a version of the product that, interestingly, the users are discussing features for the product. So that's really, really, really good. This user is suggesting a lot of features. But it's a Twitter-like experience. Okay, it's loading stuff. Where I can vote on something. I can say, okay, I like this. And here I can say, I will delegate some votes. I will not delegate. I will put some votes on this. And I'll say, yes, I'll give you 140 of my votes. Well, maybe not now, but you get the idea. I have a basic set of tokens. I have almost like 4,000 tokens here. 68% of my votes are cast. All the decisions in the system are always on. They have no closing dates. This is a design decision. Why it's always on? Because it gives me the ability to override my vote later, and that fights coercion. That makes the system a real-time system that brings a lot of interesting properties. We did originally polls with closing dates, but as we studied the system more, we figured always-on decisions, real-time democracy, and the ability to always have the final word regarding how you feel about something, and building your political statements by allocating this token on decisions looks like a very interesting outcome for us as we research the application. Here on the left, I have my delegates, the people that I have delegated votes to, and here's the rest of the people that are in this organization. For instance, I can check here my friend Virgil from Paris. He's part of Democracy Earth. And here I can see who has delegated votes to Virgil and who Virgil has delegated votes to. If I look into profiles, I can see that I delegated 300 and something votes to Vir, and I can delegate some votes more because I really like this guy, and I delegate. And that's it. And Vir has now more, is more accountable to me, so I hope he doesn't make any weird decisions. This is the first release of Sovereign. It has been under development for 2 years. And of course, it's entirely available on GitHub. On GitHub, you can check the Sovereign repo. We are constantly contributing to it. I am, on a daily basis, try to at least contribute or push some new code to it. We are finishing the integration with Blockstack right now for identity, which is really cool. And we have a roadmap ahead. We want to figure out how to integrate it with Lightning Network, how to integrate it with IPFS, how to make a client with Electron. There are many challenges regarding building the technology, but this is the main app that we have been working at, Democracy Earth. So if we're able to figure out a decentralized index of self-sovereign identities, then that information is the backbone where we can start building on top of that two killer applications. One is the killer application of universal basic income on a global scale. Because what you want to make sure on UBI is to guarantee that there's not a person getting more than its fair share of liquidity. And from a democratic perspective, guaranteeing liquidity to participants helps the democracy to not be run by financial interests. The other killer application of a decentralized self-sovereign index of identities is democracy itself. And they are the two very much interconnected in our view. Liquid democracy really means liquidity in the sense of how folks in the UBI world are thinking about it, and democracy means, this historical pursuit of history of empowering people. So we are looking into the dynamics of these two things, and they are very well described in our paper. At least we try to. So our next step is we need to grow as a global organization, and we are doing an ICO to start a movement around a borderless democracy. We want to start a movement that is able to bring this kind of power to everyone. And again, our mission is to include everyone. And by everyone, we mean everyone, no exceptions. So we are looking at this from a human rights perspective. And the challenge we know is very big, and we cannot do it on our own. So we need to make this a movement. We need to make this something that goes out of control, something that makes me personally totally irrelevant to the project, because it needs to be something that is pursued by a generation across the whole planet. Our token dynamics, we try to be very clear about it in the sense that we are locking funds for the foundation on the long term, on the sense that we are providing incentives for investors to participate, but you can look more into the details, and we are still figuring this stuff out on ico.democracy.earth. If you want to participate on this, just give your email on ico.democracy.earth, and we'll be more than happy to share you all the details of how we are thinking about this as an organization. We are already a very big team. Yesterday, actually, we announced yesterday our ambassadors program. We already have an ambassador in the UK who gave an extraordinary TED Talk at TEDx in Birmingham, Sani Sanga. We already have we have an ambassador in Colombia who helped us to implement the first pilot of sovereign on the Colombian referendum on the peace agreement last year, and gave us very interesting results. We published the information about that first pilot we did in Colombia. We are already, we are a distributed team that has presence in 11 countries right now, and we need to be on every country, in every city, and the governance of our organization is the very software that we're building. We need to be our own staff. Otherwise, it's not working. So we need to commit to understand how this technology actually works, and figure out the way to scale governance, so we don't longer depend on a narcissist guy using very weird hairdos. So our community is growing. You can follow me on Twitter and Democracy Earth as well. We have a lot of posts on Medium, on GitHub. We keep a lot of activity. If you are not technical on GitHub, the whole paper is available on GitHub. And we are needing a lot of help translating the paper, improving and polishing the ideas of the paper, bringing some more mathematics to some of the modeling we have done in the paper. So please, the best way to contribute and to work with us is directly check out the stuff that we put on GitHub. And on Slack, we spend a lot of time talking with the community there. We've been very lucky to get support from some very, very notorious organizations in different ways. Y Combinator, the TED conference, MIT, which I mentioned. So that helps us at least get good advice as an organization. And as a final note, I'm not talking necessarily about direct democracy, representative democracy. I'm talking about democracy, period. And democracy is always a work in progress. If democracy was an absolute idea, it would be a totalitarian ideology like every other political idea out there. Democracy is the one exception. It's the decision system about how we make decisions. And in that sense, it's a constant effort, and it requires practice, and it requires a lot of learning and a lot of listening, not just talking. And in these 5 years, we learned a lot. It has been an incredible journey, but it's still the beginning. And we're really aiming to think about the very, very long term, because we have no other option left. We have to take care of the planet, we have to take care of life, and we have to guarantee that humanity, and make sure that humanity can do better, and it will do better. You may say, I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Thank you.
Thanks, Santi. By the way, that talk was incredible. Thank you. The last portion of the evening, we're going to do a panel conversation. In just a second, we're just going to get set up. So if you want to stretch your legs or use the restrooms, it's a good time to do it. Hang on for 1 second. Thank you. Okay, you guys have already met 3 of our panelists. I'm going to introduce the last one you haven't met yet. Guys, please meet Michael Sena. Sena, how do you say it? Yes, Sena. Michael Sena. All right. Michael is the co-founder and product lead at Uport, where he's focused on building an interoperable, decentralized identity platform on Ethereum. You heard Santi mention a few minutes ago, talk about identity, how it's important. As an application developer myself, I can speak to how awesome the work that these guys at Uport are doing is. That was a very compliment. These guys are doing awesome stuff. Identity is important. Key management is very hard in Ethereum and the blockchain. And so hopefully we'll have a chance to hear more about that with you tonight. All right. I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions here for the gentleman we have up here. As I mentioned before, we're going to be accepting questions via Twitter. So if you tag them with the blockchain for good hashtag, I've got an iPad here, I'll see them. And then we'll take a few minutes to do questions from the audience as well. All right. I'm going to start with a question for Santi. What places, what countries, what jurisdictions, what organizations around the world do you realistically think might move forward with the kind of liquid democracy, the democracy style liquid democracy that you described, or generally things like on-chain voting?
So I think that small nation states that have nothing to lose, that are very tight communities, in the hundreds of thousands, if not less, are very interesting places. And there are actually a lot of them, like small islands in the Pacific and in the Commonwealth. And we actually started having conversations with one of such islands, the island of Guernsey, Guernsey is between between Britain and France. 60,000 people. The interesting thing about islands is that there are closed systems, so anything that is social and you want to observe what's going on, it's a very interesting context, gives a lot of resolution. I traveled to Guernsey last year, and I'm planning to travel there next year. And I think that we can, start challenging the concept of sovereignty and working with these sovereign small nation states, and slowly take every island, and then we take the continents and we take over. First we take Manhattan, then we take over.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, I'm going to go to Michael because you haven't had a chance to speak yet. Can you feel free to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and then just segue into tell us about identity, what it means to you, and maybe how it segues into some of the stuff that Santi talked about.
Cool. Yeah, I'll quickly bridge. So for all of you that don't know, thanks Lynn for the intro. I'm Michael Senna. I'm co-founder and product lead at Uport, decentralized identity platform similar to the Blockstack one that Santi was mentioning in his talk. And yeah, so basically we are building a decentralized identity infrastructure on the Ethereum blockchain. That's sort of where we are deploying it first, because we see a whole new wave of decentralized applications being built, and those decentralized applications need an identity system. So we're using Ethereum as the sort of decentralized identity index or registry, and we're working with Blockstack and others in the community to connect these different identity networks or networks on which decentralized identities are being registered, and creating some sort of a global blockchain naming system, so that all of these identities can be resolved and they can share data and be interoperable, and sort of provide these borderless global shared solutions that will power some of the stuff that Santi's talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, cool. So my next question, this is not directed at anyone in particular, it's basically about poverty and inequality. So these are kind of big problems today. I'm just wondering how you guys think that these blockchain technologies can be used to begin to address poverty, inequality, those sorts of things.
Yeah. I think this goes back to those 2.6 billion people we talked about earlier. And it ties directly into what Santi and Mike were talking about with identity. If you look at a lot of the problems in the world and a lot of the poverty in the world, there's a really common trend, which is poor people don't have identity. In the States, that means they don't have passports. In Canada, that means they're in a refugee camp. They don't have any sort of state form of identity. When we talk about identity, I think it's really key that we talk about identity as a human right. We're all humans. We're all who we say we are right now because we have government-issued IDs. That's pretty fucked up. You guys are not humans because the government says you're humans. You're humans because you are a complex individual with a history, reputation, interactions with everyone around you. Poverty stems from not having access to those reputations, not having access to that identity. If you're not a reputable human being, you can't take out a loan, you can't start a business, you can't buy a house. Sorry, and that keeps you stuck in poverty in an endless cycle of poverty. So when we talk about blockchain, talk about things like sovereign Uport, what we're really talking about is giving people access to the rest of the world. We're giving them access to the global economy, and all of a sudden they start to be able to share into the wealth that is just out there. And once you get access to that, you've got a path out of poverty. And if what we can do with blockchain is simply create more equal markets, more opportunities, or more market and opportunity for individuals to get involved in ways they've never been able to get involved before, that's a really, really big first step for creating an equal world. So one of the things that we're really focused on with our social impacts and consensus is making sure that it's not getting too right. Making sure that we are focused on those less fortunate than a lot of us in the room. If we don't think about blockchain, think about the solutions with impoverished people, whether they're in the States, whether they're in Bangladesh, wherever they are, if we're not designing for them, then we're not building for a better world. So it's really simple for us that we want to make the world a better place. Let's make it a better place for everyone. And that means giving people access to the economy.
There's a little thing that we discovered. Google, up to nonprofits, gives $10,000 to spend on AdWords for free every month. And so we started using that to detect people searching about registering to vote anywhere. And Google is a technology that reaches every place. And we started discovering that elections were happening in countries that sometimes you never think about. We realized that there was an election going on in Burkina Faso in 3 weeks, or in Mozambique. And it's interesting when you start, understanding, looking into the what's going on in the world for real, beyond the editorial filtering that we get from the traditional media. And for us, we try to really pay attention to not make any differentiation. And if we see opportunities of using technology in these places, we will do it. The interesting thing about digital technology is that, in Latin America, there's the famous digital gap, and it's a very strong gap. 55% of the people access the internet, 45% do not. But when you look closer into that statistic, you realize that it's actually generational. The ones that are not connected are our parents or grandparents. And when I learned this, I went to the poorest slums in Argentina. And these are places that have no potable water. There's not terribly bad, people live in very horrendous conditions, but actually every teenager had a smartphone. And the fact that these technologies can reach those places that banks and governments as social technologies really do not reach, it's an incredible opportunity. And I think that we need to pay a lot of attention to that.
Awesome. I have the first question from the audience here. What are the leading ideas for a proof of identity protocol or pointer? In other words, what replaces social security numbers? Want to start?
Yeah, that's. I don't think there's one answer for that one. At least not that I've come across in my research in the space in a couple of years. So I think when trying to determine proof of individuality, there are many ways you can do it. I mean, today I can log into Coinbase, hypothetically, connect my identity, my self-sovereign identity, to an existing trust provider that is theoretically already KYC'd me, and they can provide me a proof of that KYC that I can then share with others. That's like one simple way. More complex ways are when you try to determine proof of individuality through an analysis of collections of these claims. So all of the data that currently sits in corporation silos that reflects my behavior on those platforms over a period of time is probably the strongest indicator of uniqueness or individuality. So I think as we begin to progress the state of the art beyond a simple static signed statement saying this is a real person, and we move towards more dynamic systems that learn and evolve and are sort of one-to-one and contextual, I think that's where we'll get very strong signs of individuality.
Awesome. Maybe a couple more from Twitter. We can go to the mic after that. Maybe this is for you, Santi. How do you undermine the political systems and nation states that are propped up by nuclear weapons controlled by the few?
All right. The nuclear question. There is a short story of Jorge Luis Borges, the best writer ever, an Argentine writer. I love Borges, and he wrote this short story that is called Utopia of a Tired Man. And it's very, very short, probably 2 pages, but it's a very succinct description of what an utopia feels like in a very Borgian style. It's like it's totally detached from emotion. And there's a paragraph in that description of a perfect utopia that says, we lived in a time where governments were increasing taxes, sanctioning citizens, declaring wars, and simply nobody cared because it was just not part of their lives anymore. So I obviously quoted that in the wrong way. Borges does it way better than me. But the idea is of really migrating to an alternative reality. Like we migrate as citizens to an alternate dimension that is governed by blockchains. I think that's actually what's going on with Bitcoin and Ethereum and a lot of these technologies. People are simply, tuning into a complete different frequency. I don't even read the mainstream media news on my Twitter feed anymore. I only follow crypto Twitter, which is a lot of fun. But for my own survival and for my own prospects as an individual in this world, it's what I really care about. And I think that goes to the spirit of let's make them less relevant. Now, of course, they have guns and weapons, and they can coerce you, but I think it's still a very, very big question that we need to explore how to figure that out. We cannot also go in the direction of totally anti-system and doing 1917 all over again. That failed miserably. So it's not about destroying the legacy system. It's building probably a new layer and understanding what that new layer means and being able to integrate eventually what the best things of what we have learned from history and what we are inheriting, and a lot of good things about traditional governments, and increase the ability for anyone to participate. So we make sure we deactivate all those bombs eventually.
I actually jump in on top of that. I come from a political background. I was actually always thought I was going to spend my entire life in politics until the 2016 election happened. And at that point decided that, man, I'm going to leave and go do something a little bit more fun. But I think one of the things that I've taken with me from that space is the idea of grassroots organization. And this is just kind of jumping on top of what Santi's talking about, but we want to undermine traditional legacies, undermine traditional governments. And it's not about destroying them, as Santi said. It's about empowering the people to lead them and building from the bottom, build that foundation. And that's the way political movements are successful. That's what happened in the States. I mean, we started to see these organizations arising, and they started at the local level. They started at municipality, they started at school board. Let's focus there. Let's build a community of people who are dedicated to doing this as individuals and let that grow up. I like to think about blockchain as like the truest epitome of quantum economics. We're empowering the base to transact in any way, shape, or form. If that's money or that's votes, they're still the ones who have the most power. And we just have to activate that. I think that's how we get our guns.
Awesome, thanks guys. Back on the topic of identity for a moment, I've got kind of a two-part here, so I'm combining a couple questions. Number one, how secure are identities in the blockchain? And number two, what about people who are kind of against technology or who don't want to be tracked or identified within a monitoring app?
Sure. So identities, decentralized identities, sort of by definition, as they're some public identifier and a private key that controls that identifier. Decentralized identities are only as secure and as decentralized as the private keys that control them. And so I don't think an identity inherently can be self-sovereign without the key being self-sovereign. So it's about user-controlled private keys. Because you can have an identity system that begins as self-sovereign, and I as a user am given control over my key, and I decide that I don't want to be self-sovereign or I can't manage technology. I think that's a failure on our part as technologists trying to make the technology easy and usable. But individuals can theoretically delegate responsibility of managing their own private keys to whatever trust network they so decide. Because ultimately, I think self-sovereign identity is around choice. And providing individuals with the initial choice of what to do with that key, I think, is the first step.
Awesome, thanks. Santi, are there third-party applications communities using Sovereign today to facilitate voting communities?
We have a long list of the organizations and users that want to pilot it within their entities. We just released the first public version of Sovereign, which is alpha, as I mentioned, still very buggy, a month ago. But we have done in the past many implementations with the previous incarnation of our technology, the project known as Democracy OS, which is still going on. That's not blockchain based. It's a very simple do-it-yourself democracy where you vote directly on issues. And we have tried implementing that. We have actually implemented that with a senator in Mexico, a political party in Spain. The constitutional reform of Tunisia was debated on it. That was actually the first version that we saw translated into another language other than English or Spanish. So we built a network of a lot of political and NGO organizations that are really using these technologies, testing them out. In the case of what we have built before, it was always sporadic implementations that lasted 3 weeks, 1 week, depending on the issue being debated, and then it died out. And all the network effects got lost because you were not able to discover what else was going on within that community or the other communities related to the same technology. So with Democracy Earth, we're trying to figure out a way where we can really benefit from the network effects. Successful civic technology is the technology we use every day. Twitter and Facebook, that's successful civic technology. So that's why from we know it's extremely challenging, but we're really trying to think what it means to do the Linux equivalent to a Facebook. And it needs to be a technology that is able to be part of our daily lives. And it becomes a habit. Democracy needs to be a habit. So in that sense, we are really making this technology more user-centric than organization-centric. And that's because of the many lessons we learned during the Partido de la Red years.
Thanks. Open question. How do we make representation within the blockchain community a bit more diverse? It's an important question.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that as I was getting ready to get up on this panel. 3 white dudes, 4 white dudes, 4 white dudes on the panel. This doesn't look great for us. I apologize. And I was thinking through that as I was coming up here.
Me too.
And I think really one of the things we have to do is and unfortunately none of us did this tonight, but we have to say no. Sorry that we didn't. I think that's a failing on the 4 of us right now, actually, and am pretty upset by it, to be honest. And we need to empower the women and minorities in the space. We need to put them in charge. We need to put them at the forefront and say, this is technology for you, built by you. We're here to support. We're here to protect. We're here to just give you a platform. And as we start to do that, as we start to take a moral stand and empower the non-whiteness of the world, we're going to start to see diversity happen. There are brilliant women, children, people, all races and colors, ethnicities, religions. And unfortunately, we are working in a space that hasn't done the best job of activating them the way that we can. I think one of the most exciting things that's going to happen is 2018 arrives, and we see the community explode, as it's happened over the last couple of months, is that we're going to see a lot more diversity just come in because there are more people present in the space. And as that influx of people comes in, we need to step aside. We have to give them a platform, and we have to say, you guys are building, this is your stage, take it. And that's just the way I think we have to do it. And I think a lot of that onus is on those of us in positions of power right now to be willing to say that. So yeah, that's a hard one because that's like we're part of the problem.
So you're gonna step down?
Yeah, and I would say it's less diversity is always a topic, but it's about inclusion, and that comes in a lot of ways. I think it's about we can't sort of like go back in blockchain time and sort of say like how could we involve people earlier, but we can change what we do going forward in lessons. And I think the more we can simplify concepts and the more that we can tie them to real world use cases and just show little proofs of concepts of things working or use case examples or things in normal human terms, I think we'll see some adoption of the technologies or the ideas behind the technologies that will sort of help us include more people in whatever ways that is.
We've talked about this a lot at Crypto NYC. I want to let you guys know that we're still young, we're still working things out like culture and values, but we've settled upon inclusivity as one of our values. We intend to build relationships with organizations like Girls That Code. If you guys are part of any of those organizations, please come talk to us. We want to do that. We want to really represent all New Yorkers, all people, doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from. I'm going to try a little experiment here because I believe in doing these kinds of things. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to pick on the women in the room tonight, I'm going to ask someone to come replace me. I'm not joking. Seriously, come stand up here. Sit up here. Tell us who you are. Join the conversation. Anybody?
All our All right, I'll moderate. What are the questions?
Good.
All right.
Take some questions from the crowd. Who wants?
How about an introduction?
Yeah, let's start.
Hi, my name is Amala. I'm a woman. I'm also Mexican, so a minority as well. I'm doing a master's in data science and doing a data science internship. And I also organize blockchain events.
My question is actually on governance systems. So can you guys talk about the most effective governance systems that you've seen that are enabling democracy and not just allowing people with the most power to be allowed to make the system? Or not?
Can you talk about making sure that people who want power aren't the only people using the system?
Wow. I definitely don't have an answer, but I have questions. But I think it's like a lot of existing power structures can definitely just be replicated on private blockchain. So it's of course super important to see who is controlling them. If you have, whether it's private or consortium blockchains, you definitely, like you said, if 3 men in New York are controlling it, it's not much of a decentralized or a democratic platform. It's just a technology. It's not going to be inherently democratic or inherently perfect or decentralized if the right people aren't controlling it and if we're not careful. And yeah, I don't know how much to say, just that a lot of effort and thought and care needs to be put into anything.
We actually give a lot of thought, and it's a constant exercise on our brainstorming sessions in the foundation, how we can ensure that everyone participating in the system, it's not being coerced by the powerful in any possible way. And it's one of the biggest challenges when you think about designing democratic systems or governance systems. From the perspective of the token that we are designing, we are building a protocol where, as long as you are able to validate your identity, and as long as we can find incentives in the network to prevent duplicate participants from hijacking their legitimate right for their allocation of tokens, make sure that we can provide some liquidity as a human right to every participant in the network. And we expect and we hope that that's able to protect against financial coercion and against other forms of coercion. But it's a constant problem. As long as you want to have a system that is able to represent every voice, I think this is like the main topic to look into. When in Argentina, when there are elections, it's very obvious how coercion happens among the most the outcasts of society, where some politicians decide to do things when it's campaign season, and then they don't do the things that they were committed to, and they speculate in the media. So we really try to look into the technology and to the economics of the token that we're building from a human rights perspective. And we always talk about how we can evolve the system from the initial funding mechanisms that we are building towards something that is really accessible for everyone, regardless of income or any kind of profiling. So I think that's the real challenge of governance. And like I said in the presentation, the main question that we are always trying to answer is how we include everyone. We have a question over here.
Hi. I already actually asked Santi this question, but I'd love to address the panel. What you refer to as majoritialism. So what happens if like 90% of the planet decides they want to extinguish a race? Sorry, but it's
Yeah, Hitler won the
It's
election.
possible, I mean,
From that's why there are two axes that we're trying to look. One is the axis of legitimacy. You want to guarantee everyone being able to participate in the system to sustain the legitimacy of the decisions being made. But the other axis is hopefully making sure that we can have the decisions being made based on facts and not on fake news or political manipulation or gossip. So an interesting property of blockchains is that the distance between the institutional event or the actual event and what gets and the information being broadcasted to a network or broadcasted through the media is very, very short, because the blockchain itself is storing and registering events in a way that anyone can look at them without requiring, without needing journalists and all the media conglomerate that filters and distorts and bends information pursuing a political interest of one side or the other. I think that blockchains really serve a very interesting, really can be used as a way of fighting fake news or gossip or information that is driven by a force that is trying to bend the facts. That said, I think that also there are a lot of things that we need to figure out as these technologies evolve and mature. We have a lot of lessons being learned by the Facebook experience of the past 10 years and all of the web paradigm on the internet, and we really need to bring those to heart as we have a chance of this new wave of technologies that will undoubtedly eventually start taking more precedence over how we interact with the internet to make sure that we build systems that can guarantee legitimacy, but that are also can guarantee intelligent and rational and thoughtful, conscious decisions.
Sorry, go ahead.
And then on top of that, just because we can build something doesn't mean that we should. As we're going through a design process, as we're talking about a solution, you have to sit down and you have to ask yourself that question. You have to ask yourself, who are the malicious actors in the region? What are their capabilities? What are they going to do if they get their hands on this technology? Are they going to kidnap people? Are they going to kill people? Are they going to try to get your private keys? You need to at least have an idea of what the answers to those questions are before you try to go on the ground and do something. I mean, digital identity, ledgers of identity, like, Jesus, we don't need any more knowledge of our history to know that that's horrifying if you use it properly. And we have so much learning to do as a space, and we have so much, so much to learn. Not even about the technology, but about the way humans are going to use the technology. And if we don't start to focus on that, we don't start to do the research on who humans are and how humans interact with the system that's designed to change society, change the way we interact with each other, we're going to cause problems. Do no harm, right? Do no harm is the core tenet of the humanitarian world. You should not do something if it's going to cause damage. Are we ever going to be able to achieve that in the innovation space? Probably not. But we shouldn't be testing on vulnerable populations. We shouldn't be testing Somalia or Syria. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is real. Don't focus on the worst people. Don't focus on the most vulnerable. That's twice tonight. I'm so sorry. Don't focus on the most vulnerable populations. Focus on the people that you can help without hurt. Start there, learn, and as we get better, we'll be able to help more people.
We have time for probably one more question.
So I'm Ken Chester, one of the co-founders of what was once, well now it's Mana, but it was Grant Point before. And so naturally I'm curious how you see the interaction of universal basic income, UBI, and digital democracy.
So I would encourage to check our paper, the social smart contract. For us, it was something that we were not actually actively looking into UBI, but we found ourselves understanding that it's an important thing if we want to have a democracy that wants to avoid coercion through financial means, which is a very common form of coercion. And the bottom line for us is, if we are able to figure out as a global society a way of having identities and recognizing the participation of all those identities and understanding those processes, then we can really build. When I talk more and more about liquid democracy, I really split the two. Liquidity as a human right to me is UBI, and democracy is governance, and they're really intertwined because of the fact that money is power, and money can buy votes, and the two things are very much in connection historically, and we need to understand how that has been done historically. And but I think we have a shot at this. Identities, I think, is a very important component to unlocking the potential of both liquidity and democracy.
All right, I've got one last question for you guys. I'd like to hear an answer from each of you. We've got a lot of very excited, engaged, energetic people in the room here tonight. What advice do you guys have for people here to help out what you guys are doing, to learn more, to get involved? Where should people start?
Pick up the mic. To me, I've been involved with Bitcoin since 2011, and I still feel like a newbie in the field. I keep learning every day something new. I keep challenging myself to figure out how I can understand the things that I still don't understand. And my best advice is to not fear what you fear with the complexity of these topics. Understanding how a blockchain works takes some time. And it's a constant learning process. It's a very long rabbit hole, but it's totally worth it, because as you start understanding better the properties of these networks and these systems, you also understand better how the world functions, how money functions, how the world of finance functions, and that's alphabetization. That's acquiring fundamental skills for survival. And I would really encourage for anyone to follow their curiosity, and to, we are very lucky to be already a species that is connected by the internet, and that we have access to so many resources, and that the fact that we can ask questions online and reach anyone on Twitter and everything, it seems to be flattering. And that's a very interesting pursuit for personal growth, in the sense of increasing our ability to look at the world under a new lens, and finally discovering that the way the world has to work, it's not the way the politicians tell us how it has to work. There is this alternative, and this alternative is very real, and we are in this incredible awakening as a global society, and we are very lucky to be alive in this moment. So let's better do something good.
Okay, you can go. That was great. Yeah, thank you. I think remembering to do good in all of this, and take your time. One thing that I've learned trying to build an identity system on Ethereum for the last year and a half is it's very easy to run into these massive ideas and these big, seemingly insurmountable boulders. And every day there's a new challenge. Learning something new about the blockchain, unlocking some new property that it can do. But it's important to remember to start small. Like in Ethereum's case, a smart contract is like one little piece of code that can do one specific thing. And just think small and try to experiment with these things, because I don't think anything that we're building today is sort of unquestionable. I think we're still very, very early in how these things can be used. It's still to be determined if there will be 3 blockchain networks, 20 blockchain networks. It's still left to be determined how to build a hybrid server blockchain application. Like, all of these questions are still very, very new. And so start small and take it easy.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this, which is that if you want to do something with blockchain, you want to build something. In fact, let's go beyond blockchain. If you want to do anything, if you want to start a business, you want to build any product,
and it's your idea, make sure that when you put together a team, you're the dumbest person on the team. Force yourself to be engaged with people who have different perspectives. Force yourself to if you're in the blockchain space, go and talk to some crypto anarchists if you're a super liberal. Go and talk to a crazy conservative. I don't mean crazy in the sense that like they're a crazy person, I mean crazy in the sense that like they're far on the right. Like engage with people with different thought processes and different understandings of the way the world works. If you're thinking about blockchain from one lens, if you're thinking about it as a tool for social impact, think about how it can go wrong. Spend time taking both sides. Just broaden your horizons and go beyond just the usual, like, hey, I'm going to read X and Y, Z white papers, and figure out to really formulate your own opinions and share them with others and learn through discussion. And I think the best way to really do that is to not be afraid to ask questions. And I mean, at the risk of talking in cliche, no question's a dumb question, especially in a space that's growing this fast.
The question was how to learn more.
What advice do you have for people getting started, next steps?
Okay. I think, well, I'm in a lot of groups on Telegram and Facebook about crypto events, so people are constantly posting articles. So you get all articles and links to events with commentary from people who you know. So that's been really helpful for me. So I'm not just like scouring the internet for random things, but having people I sort of know say what's good, what's not, and just going to events like these. It's so much easier to have people who know what they're talking about, who are great people explaining something to you than just sitting alone in your room and being intimidated and being like, I'm not sure I'm going to understand this. So if you have people who are passionate about the subject, caring about it, especially in a panel, it's just, the learning curve is just so much easier to not be intimidated and learn about all these topics. So that's it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. So yeah, so Crypto NYC was built specifically to help people get started. We're built by beginners for beginners. We're all beginners. I love saying there's no experts in this space. So come be a beginner with us, sign up for the mailing list, join the Telegram group, and help us build awesome events like this in the future. Thank you guys again for coming. Happy holidays. Oh, I think we have. Yeah, no, that's already 45 minutes. Yeah. Oh, should you want to? I mean, feel free if you want to. I thought it was like an unofficial thing, but I'll be honest, we're gonna get mocked and stuff here for 30 minutes anyway. Like, we're not gonna get out of here. So I think it's better if we just keep it informal.
I have even more ideas. So we're gonna have lunch or coffee or something.
All right.
All
Next
right?
week is pretty good for me. I'm around. It's
Yeah,
be
let's
quiet.
do something. You're gonna be here or you're gonna be in Brooklyn?
Gonna be
Well, it
mostly in
doesn't matter.
Manhattan. Mostly in Manhattan. I live up
Well,
top.
yeah, we can, whatever
Cool.
you want to do.
Cool.
And thank you. I am totally blown away by what you did by giving up your seat.
Yeah, thanks for taking that question.
I was
Thank
trying.
you. They were great questions.
I was trying to figure out how to tweet about it, but I couldn't
Without
get it
yeah,
down
yeah,
right.